The administration keeps saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes," and that's why you're
respectfully, Joe.
That's why you're at 18%.
Respectfully, I think congressional Republicans are saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes."
In 6 months instead of 6 years now.
Which is why they're polling at about 15% right now.
For president.
Is it my lying eyes that under Joe Biden we've had the most job creation in American history? Is it my lying eyes telling us that unemployment and inflation are both below 4% and have been that way for the longest time in who knows when? Is it reality? Or is it spin?
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
When he gets going, there are few better at this than Secretary Buttigieg.
Well, there's a classic parlor game of trying to find a little bit of daylight between running mates. And if people want to play that game, we could look into why an evangelical Christian like Mike Pence wants to be on a ticket with the president caught with a porn star, or how he feels about the immigration policy that he called unconstitutional before he decided to team up with Donald Trump. If folks want to play that game, we could do it all night. But
now I know what you're thinking. While tuning into this segment, it seems that Fox News got their logo mixed up in the corner there.
Well, hold on, let's be clear here,
let me finish first. But every time we hear those talking points that suddenly it was Republicans who ruined the border, that's why people get so frustrated.
Here's what Speaker Johnson said. I have seen enough. This bill is even worse than we expected. It won't come close to ending the border catastrophe the president has created. As the lead Democrat negotiator proclaimed, under this legislation, the border never closes. If this bill reaches the House, it will be dead on arrival. Your thoughts?
Yeah, unfortunately, he would step out and be able to say that right away before, obviously, he had had a chance to be able to read it as well and to be able to go through it. The key aspect of this, again, is, are we as Republicans going to have press conferences and complain the border's bad and then intentionally leave it open after the worst month in American history in December? Now we've got to actually determine, are we going to just complain about things, or are we going to actually address and change as many things as we can? If we have the shot, and it's amazing to me, if I go back 2 months ago and say we had the shot under a Democrat president to dramatically increase detention beds, deportation flights, lock down the border, to be able to change the asylum laws, to be able to accelerate the process, no one would have believed it. And now no one actually wants to be able to fix it and says, I don't want to even debate it. I don't want to discuss it. We have to decide as Republicans, what are we going to actually do about the border? Leave it open or actually leave it closed?
All jokes aside, this was on CNBC last week as Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg was pressed on border issues by host Joe Kernan, who seemed upset that the Biden administration haven't done enough to fix the border, while then talking over Pete Buttigieg as he tried to explain how congressional Republicans did everything possible to prevent bipartisan legislation to help address said border.
In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing. That bipartisan bill would hire 1,500 more security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backload of 2 million cases, 4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years now.
Amidst the back and forth, once Buttigieg was allowed to speak, he reminded Kernan and viewers why he remains one of the sharpest politicians in the Democratic Party.
Well, hold on, let's be clear here,
let me finish first. But every time we hear those talking points that suddenly it was Republicans who ruined the border, that's why people get so frustrated. We know what President Biden said about inviting people in. We know that he got rid of all the things that were keeping the border closed that President Trump had put in. We know that he got rid of all those. So when you say it's not his fault,
that's literally not true. It's literally not true that he got rid of the It's true he got rid of he got rid of family separation.
Did you see 7.2 million people come in during the Trump administration? It was a trickle.
He got rid of the policy to tear children out of the arms of their parents. That's true. But it is not true. Some of the other things that have been suggested. Let's be clear. Bipartisan efforts of border reform have taken place in 2015, 2006. I mean, literally since the Reagan administration, right? There have been bipartisan efforts to get something done here. But I really believe we've gotten to the point where many congressional Republicans find it so useful as a cudgel that they would rather keep the problem going for political uses than solve the problem and risk the chance that the president could share in the credit for that. In the same way that we see some of them, even though we had great bipartisan cooperation on the infrastructure bill that I work on, a lot of them who were against that, only to turn around and try to get credit for it when we actually have a ribbon cutting or a groundbreaking.
The reason that some of these numbers stay where they are is because it just seems like instead of actually owning some of the issues that we have, instead of acknowledging that the president maybe has lost a step, the administration keeps saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes," and that's why you're
respectfully, Joe.
That's why you're at 18%.
Respectfully, I think congressional Republicans are saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes," which is why they're polling at about 15% right now.
I know that
right
Congress
now,
has never. Congress isn't running
have
for
economic numbers
for
that
president.
Is it my lying eyes that under Joe Biden we've had the most job creation in American history? Is it my lying eyes telling us that unemployment and inflation are both below 4% and have been that way for the longest time in who knows when? Is it reality or is it spin? To point out the fact.
Here's what I love about this, right? Hal Kernan tried to premise the argument that this administration is blaming Republicans to cover their own malpractice. But he's citing the points made by fellow Republicans who have on countless occasions gone on record to say, hey, we can't govern. Hell, we have legislation that is bipartisan that MAGA Republicans won't even humor or read out of fear that their cult leader will pull a chair from the table.
Senator Mike Lee said, not only does he say he needs 3 weeks to read through it, he said no self-respecting senator should agree to vote on a 370-page bill this week. Any 41 senators can prevent the bill from proceeding. If you agree that senators should have this bill for at least a few weeks and certainly more than a few days before voting on it, say so. You understand where he's coming from, right? Don't you guys have a procedural vote this week? And you're going to vote on the bill by the end of the week?
So we actually have this bill came out yesterday, Sunday. The first procedural vote is Wednesday, and that procedural vote is literally just open it up to be able to go through it and to be able to say, are we going to debate it this week? That's what Senator Lee is actually talking about. It's interesting that he said he's already opposed to it. He needs 3 weeks to be able to read it, but he's already opposed to it. Again, people have got to be able to read it, go through it themselves. Don't just go off a Facebook post somewhere what the bill says. This dramatically changes asylum. It dramatically changes deportations. We no longer have a 10-year backlog. It builds more wall. Those are the key things that it actually does. But read it for yourselves. Don't just believe what's online.
It's pathetic. And as Buttigieg pointed out, it's actually indicative of the modern day GOP who can barely agree on their own speaker, let alone policy. Meanwhile, it's not believing lying eyes to see that this administration have made monumental strides in regards to stabilizing a train wreck economy that they inherited.
Let me just say one thing positive about the where we are right now. One thing that Biden said last night that was true. It is true that the United States today has the strongest economy. There's no question about it. If you look at what's happening in Europe today, Germany, Britain, France, if you look at Japan and China, they're not growing. And so it is true that, we are, the way I like to put it, Maria, is we are the least rotten apple in the cart. And that's something that's important to cheer.
Lowering drug prices, forgiving student loan debt, record-breaking unemployment, record-breaking stock market, historic infrastructure in green energy. These are not spin tactics. These are actually facts. To not believe them would be lying to yourself.
Do you feel that America today is in a better place than it was 4 years ago?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, when we got here 4 years ago, when we moved here, there were still blast walls and barriers around the United States Capitol to deal with the violent attack that had taken place just a few weeks earlier. That's the condition that the country was left in when President Biden took office. I think of some examples just from aviation, right, where right now we're dealing with issues related to how the airlines can deal with that extraordinary demand they have in this rapidly growing economy. When we took office 4 years ago, three some years ago, the big question was whether America's aviation sector was going to go out of business. Millions of jobs had been lost. Hundreds of thousands of lives had been lost in the COVID pandemic. If you want to compare where we are now to where we were when President Biden took office, look, there's a lot of work to be done. But President Biden inherited a country that was reeling from the greatest political violence that it experienced in the Capitol since the Civil War, with an economy that was flat on its back, and has guided us toward economic recovery and some measure of political healing, as well as being able to put the pandemic increasingly behind us. It doesn't mean the job is done, but we're way better off than we were when we got here.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.